Right, hi folks. So this is me bragging about CAS, really, and how CAS has been influencing BCS in its policy and how we do things at BCS these days. In case you're puzzled, I actually am the director of the BCS Academy of Computing. The Academy of Computing was formed about a year ago. It's a collaborative partnership between those three groups. I won't say much about them, but those two pretty much represent all of the senior computer science academics and researchers in the UK. So that's just to say what the BCS Academy is. But what is going on these days between the CAS and BCS? Well, CAS and BCS are now collaborative partners as well. And this is official. As Simon was just saying, CAS now has its very own board within the BCS governance structure. That means that CAS is actually officially recognised as being part of the BCS's core mission with regards to its Royal Charter for Advancing Computing, which means you get our funding. It also means that when we want to decide something to do with policy about computing in school, we ask you. And what you say pretty much turns out to be BCS policy by the time it's gone through all the various hoops that things have to do in the BCS. And it's the kind of stuff that then goes into our submissions to the government, as will be blindingly obvious when I come on to the stuff that we've been doing on the national curriculum. So as far as I'm concerned, that is a fantastic result for CAS and for BCS. And as it says there, the bottom line is BCS is the group that the BCS talks to more than any other group when we want to know what to do in schools. So one of the other marvellous things that's been going on now for 9 months, I think it was from last summer, is the Royal Society are conducting a study into computing at schools. Does everybody already know about this, that it's going on? Does anybody want to admit to not knowing? So there's a few. Okay, so better say, right. So there are, as it says on the slide, there are 24 different organisations which are joining in an advisory group that are looking at what sort of computing education should we have in school, what should it look like, how do we support teachers, how do we make sure teachers get the right stuff, how do we make sure that the kids are inspired and are motivated enough through outside school activities as well. There's been an awful lot of work going on. There was a huge call for evidence from anybody and everybody about what they thought on that subject. There were over 125 submissions, which is at least twice as many as the Royal Society normally get. BCS, together with CAS, put in a submission, which was one of the ones that was highlighted as exemplary by the Royal Society. There's been a whole load of stakeholder meetings run across the country to find out what various groups thought about what should be done. Those findings came back to the latest group meeting in May, Simon? May, yep. When that was discussed, and at that point, that was when the National Curriculum Review was ongoing, and the Royal Society also wrote a rather nice little note to the Department for Education saying, don't do anything silly until you've talked to us because we know better than you, which I thought was marvellous. They didn't put it like that, but that's what it meant. Great bunch of people. And the Department for Education have definitely took note of that, and I'm hopeful that that will have an effect. Okay. National Curriculum Review. So that, I think when we talked to the civil servants, they said they'd had 6,000 responses to the National Curriculum Review. So there is a great deal going on there, and it's not at all clear what the outcome will be. An awful lot of the things we had heard up to the review deadline were not good as far as ICT went. So at BCS, together with CAS, we've been doing a huge amount of work to put in a very, very powerful, compelling response to the review, also doing a huge amount of work to actually engage with the DFE. Thanks to Simon PJ, we actually got to go along and talk to some of the civil servants a few weeks ago. We had an hour and a half talking to them about computing, which was incredibly positive. Obviously, those people could not promise that anything would happen as a result of that meeting because it's entirely down to Michael Gove and his policy advisors. But it was a constructive meeting. They did, at the end of that meeting, realise that computing is an academic discipline. It is something that's underpinned by rigour, that it is something that's underpinned by science and engineering principles. So they did take that on board. Of course, they didn't promise that it would be part of the national curriculum because the point, as far as they were concerned, was to reduce the national curriculum. Another group that the BCS has started to engage with over the last 12 months is a group called Engineering for Education. That's hosted by the Royal Academy of Engineering, and it actually represents 36 different professional bodies. This is an organisation that does now get the attention of the Department for Education. they're very concerned about a number of subjects. Design and technology is one of the ones they're very, very worried about at the moment. They also put in a response to the National Curriculum Review. Thanks to our engagement with that group, we were actually allowed to write the part of the response that was to do with ICT, because we've been working in collaboration with CAS. Pretty much what went into the BCS CAS response also went in a somewhat more condensed form into the E4E response. So we now have the D4E getting responses from the BCS, from the E4E, and from the Royal Society, all pointing out that computing is something that needs to be considered as a separate discipline. Who knows what they'll do about that? But this is another tremendous success. I mean, here we have the Royal Academy of Engineering, together with 36 professional bodies, saying that computing matters and it needs to be taught in schools. In fact, here is a quote from the response itself, and it says exactly what you would hope it to say about computer science. They have said every school pupil should encounter computing because, and then you can read it for yourself, you know, it's exactly what you would have written yourself if you wanted to say computing is matters. It's unique, it's underpinned by science and engineering and mathematics, and it's something that you need if you're going to solve hard real-world problems. Another thing we've done together with CAS, this time this is a letter that's gone from just the BCS rather than BCS plus CAS, but it was through support from various members in CAS. We wrote a letter to Michael Gove, or I should say that we got a lot of very important people from industry to write a letter to Michael Gove. And you can see there, we've got the Managing Director of Google UK, we've got Andrew Herbert, who's these days Chairman of Microsoft Research EMEA, John Higgins, who's the Director General of Intellect. Anyway, Intellect, for those of you who don't know, is the trade association for technology companies. It represents about 760 companies, including the likes of BT, BAE Systems, Motorola, Sony, a hell of a lot of very, very big companies. By now, you've probably read your way through the rest of these names here. These are very, very prominent senior industrialists. And I was very pleased to say that 24 hours after we sent the letter, which went by email, we got an email back from one of Michael Gove's special advisors, and Simon Humphries and myself will be going off to talk to them next week. So, I don't know, that's a positive outcome. One of the other things that CAS has been doing with the BCS is we've been working with a bunch of other organisations. So we went along and we talked to Nesta when they were putting together their review of the video games and visual effects industries. And Simon Humphries talked to Hassan, what's his surname? Bakshi, who's now become a real colleague of ours that we talk to quite a lot about these things. What was great about this is that they talked to us about what should be their recommendations in this report to do with schools. And we had some quite good conversations with them, and the things that we suggested ended up in the Nesta report that was then endorsed in public by Ed Vaizey, who is the Minister for Culture. So that was another very positive result. This is not really about schools, but this was a sort of show and tell, so I thought, well, I really, really want to show and brag about the BCS going off to talk to David Willits. Thanks to Microsoft Research, BCS Academy, together with Microsoft Research, CPHC and UK CRC had a half-hour meeting with David Willits. This time it was talking about funding for computer science degrees, and that was quite a positive meeting as well, so I wanted to brag about that. And finally, because I'm in the show and tell mood, I wanted to tell you about something that was done by a PhD student at Cambridge. We sponsored an award with EPSRC for recognising outstanding PhD students who have done something which is also of potentially exploitable benefit. Is that grammatically correct? Anyway, something which can be exploited for the benefit of society or industry. And this guy was fantastic. He worked out that when you tap your phone, any phone, it makes a unique sound. So the position you tap a phone, that makes a unique noise, okay? The digital signal processor, even in a really rubbishy, cheap phone, is powerful enough to analyse that sound and calculate precisely where you tapped on the screen. So his idea is, you build a bit of software, shove it in the phone, that software, when you tap on the screen, even though it's not a touch phone, can now work out where you've tapped and make something happen. So you can pop up a little display on your phone, even a cheap, rubbishy one, tap on the phone, the DSP processor will work out where it was, and it'll do something for you. Now, those 3 billion people in India and China who can't afford a touchscreen phone can now afford a touchscreen phone. This guy's going to be rich, and I know him. So I keep saying he's fantastic. So this is the kind of thing I think is absolutely brilliant and is the sort of thing we should be recognising far more. That's me done.